The Toronto Maple Leafs make a sneaky addition by bringing in a former Stanley Cup champion in Steven Lorentz on a PTO, and the Leafs still poke around on Max Pacioretty, looking to fill the void on the third line left wing now that Nick Robertson is not signed. We'll get into this and more later on this episode, but before we start, I just want to give you a huge shout out to the 28.6% of you guys that are subscribed. To the 71.5% of you guys, it's completely free to subscribe. You can keep up to date on everything to do around the NHL, so why not go down and hit that subscribe button, join the Hat Trick community, and keep up to date with everything around the league going into next season. But with that, let's hop straight into the first topic today, which is the Leafs signed Steven Lorentz to a PTO. Now, a lot of people might be saying, Mark, who is Steven Lorentz? Why is this such a big deal? But I think he fills the void on this Leafs team quite a lot. When you're looking at this, Elliot Freeman came out and he said, per the Rogers 590, sounds like Stanley Cup champion Steven Lorentz is joining Toronto on a PTO. Now, the biggest question this offseason is obviously who is the Leafs going to fill the void with from Nick Robertson being away from this team, looking at a new team, who's going to fill this third line left wing, and it seems like Steven Lorentz might come in and fight for that spot. Now, the stats don't look incredible. In 38 games, 1 goal, 2 assists for 3 points, 30 shots you can pause, look through, but Lorentz is 6'4", 28 years old, from Kitchener, Ontario. Now, when looking at Lorentz, you're saying to yourself, this guy cannot produce. This guy hasn't been outstanding when he's in the league. But when you're looking at this lineup, there's a lot of opening in the bottom six. But let's look at Lorentz's stats throughout his career. In 230 games, he has 43 points. Not a lot, but he did play all 16 games for the Florida Panthers last season in the Stanley Cup Finals. You see, in 80 games with the San Jose Sharks, he had a career high of 10 goals, 9 assists for 19 points. The year prior, in 67 games with the Carolina Hurricanes, 8 goals, 5 assists for 13 points, making 5 games into the Stanley Cup playoffs as well. And funny enough, he actually played with Max Domi on one of these Carolina Hurricane teams as well. But looking at this team, obviously the top 6, Matthew Nyes, Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, Bobby McMahon, John Tavares, and William Nylander. These are not what I'm predicting these lines to look like. This is not what the NHL is predicting. This is from daily faceoffs. But looking down into this bottom 6 is where things get tricky. Obvious guys that are going to stay in this bottom 6 is Max Domi, Calle Jarnkrok, Connor Dewar, Ryan Reeves, and you have a guy like Pontus Holmberg that might fight for this third line spot. But the Leafs do need to work out more players, because if things don't work in this bottom 6, they can't be going out and trading just assets, just as many as they can to fill this void. So they're going to start bringing in more players on PTOs. Now with Lorentz, I think he's going to come in as the 13th forward, a guy that can fill in for Connor Dewar, David Kempf, or Ryan Reeves on this team. If an injury happens, matchup dependability, just everything in between, I think he's going to be a perfect fourth line piece for this Toronto team. Now, when you do look at Lorentz, as I said, he's a guy that's not going to go out and score you a lot of goals, but he's a guy that can do the little things. When you're looking at his career high in 10 goals, that exact same season, he had 133 hits and 46 blocks in 80 games with the Sharks. You can see his time on ice was his career high with 11 minutes and 50 seconds, going down as low as 8 minutes and 47 seconds with the Florida Panthers, but he's a guy that has taken faceoffs before. You can see his first year with Carolina at the age of 24, he won 51.1% of his faceoffs. You can see the numbers slowly dropping, but with the San Jose Sharks, 47.9% on 262 wins, 485 losses. This is a guy that can go into a center role if he's in a pinch. If the Leafs are in a pinch, he's a guy that can fill out this bottom 6 if the Leafs do look at maybe trading a guy like David Kempf. Bring in Lorentz, a guy that's going to be physical. He was an incredible forechecker. Paul Maurice pumped the tires on this guy the entire playoffs, saying he's relentless on the forecheck. He can play some penalty kill time. I believe it's 50 seconds during the Stanley Cup Finals, during the Stanley Cup playoffs, time on ice during the penalty kill. He's a fast guy, a big body. He can lay hits, and he's a pest on the forecheck, which does sound like a guy like Connor Dewar, which does sound like a guy like Max Domi. Bringing in these guys that are going to be hard to play against, watching this guy succeed with the Florida Panthers is another reason that Toronto is making the right moves, bringing in these guys that have won the cup, bringing in guys that know what it takes to win, even if it was just playing in 16 games with the Panthers in the playoffs. Bringing in this guy is a great, just low risk, high reward type pick, and I do foresee in the future him being signed on a 1-year contract, maybe coming in and playing a Noah Gregor role. I can't see him coming in as a full-time fourth liner unless someone else has moved from this, but I do think he adds a lot of value to this team with injuries going to be happening with the long schedule. It's a matter of time before a guy like this could fill in the void. Now, this does get straight into the second topic today, which is Max Pacioretty is still an option. Now, I'm sure you've seen the reports everywhere that Max Pacioretty is a guy the Leafs are looking at, and from Chris Johnson, he says, certainly someone that the Leafs have some interest in, and they've looked at him really. I think Max has to make a decision for himself because it's not just the Leafs that have knocked on his door. Johnson told First Up on TSN Radio 1050. He says Toronto were talked about on some of the lack of depth on the left wing or maybe being an area that they'd like to secure Pacioretty. Continue on, say Toronto certainly is not the only option. So obviously it's not as though he's got tons of them, but as the summer is wanting to close here, he is in a position where he thinks going to be able to sign a contract rather than try out, and the Leafs are among the teams, I think, with some interest there. Now, obviously, the biggest thing is, and I've talked about it before, everyone's talked about it from everyone on YouTube to the radio, is the biggest fact of who's going to fill in that third line left wing. A guy like Pontus Holmberg could be there. If a just situation happens where Nick Robertson does come back, this guy could come in as well. But the biggest thing with Pacioretty is he's a veteran and he knows what it takes to win in this league. 47 games played, 4 goals, 19 assists for 23 points, 95 shots, 16 giveaways, 14 takeaways, minus 14 with 14 minutes and 26 time on ice. Max Pacioretty with the Capitals was coming off a leg injury. I believe it was an ACL, something with his knee. At the age of 35, almost 36, this is not what you want to see, but bringing in a guy, a depth signing that could still come around and score you maybe 15 to 20 goals, produce on offense more than guys like Pontus Holmberg, more than guys like Lorentz on this third line, could add a lot of value to this Leafs team. Obviously, there is more options. Maybe a guy like Easton Cowan makes this team. Maybe a guy like Fraser Minten could fill in this third line role on the center. Maybe a guy like Max Domi slides over. Maybe he goes up onto the first or second line and a guy like Bobby McMahon drops down. There's an option where, like I said, Easton Cowan seems like the most reasonable option out of the rookies to make this team out of the gates. I can't see him playing in the top 6 right to start, but I do think this third line left wing could add a lot of value. A young, fast rookie that dominated for the London Knights could come in and show value. Pacioretty is an option. Lorentz is a guy Toronto has just brought in that's going to play in the preseason. At the very least, he comes in, shows some flashes. The Leafs do not sign him, but it keeps a lot of their veterans healthy. They don't have to play as many bodies as they have a guy in a PTO that could make a case to make this team. We've seen Josh Hosang sign this and go down to the AHL, so maybe we're going to see Lorentz go down to the Marlies and maybe make his way up. What were your guys' thoughts on this? What's your thoughts on Pacioretty maybe coming in as the third line left wing? What's your thoughts on the Nick Robertson saga? I know everyone has a lot to say as that, so I'd like to bring that up as well. And what's your thoughts on bringing in Lorentz as a guy that could fill out the fourth line center if they do move on from David Kampf? And would you like to see Easton Cowan and Fraser Minten make this team day one of the start of the season? Let us know down in the comments. But speaking of comments, we'll get in everyone's favorite topic, which is comment of the day. Comment today comes from Paul Elliott, and he says Robertson has a chance to become one of the really good young Leafs. He has not grabbed to them. Move him for whatever the Leafs can get back. The Leafs have young players coming on board, the Marlies, or maybe a couple make the Leafs. This is a big thing too. Obviously, moving on from Robertson would give them more draft capital or prospects going into trade deadline. If Robertson really wants to move on, I think it's in the best interest for the Leafs to move him before his value drops. But if you want to leave a comment on everything we spoke on today, you could be featured as comment today like Paul Elliott did here today. Right down there, leave a like, subscribe, share this with your friends. We're trying to reach 5,000 before the season starts, so make sure to go down and hit that subscribe button. But I've been your host, Mark Pye, and take care.